Hey there, mister. Welcome to Shady Tree Auto Sales.
Oh, hey, how you doing?
I see you got to look at the old Trailblazer here.
Yeah, what kind of warranty you got on this thing?
Yes, sir. Every car on this lot's got a 24-hour around-the-block guarantee.
That good, huh? What can you tell me about that one over there?
Oh, that one right there? Oh, you won't find a finer machine in the tri-state area, mister.
In this episode of the Project Failblazer Series, I'm going to be upgrading the rear shocks by swapping the shocks from the parts Trailblazer over to this one. Plus, I'm going to try to figure out why the rear end is rattling and there's significant body roll when taking corners. And finally, I'm going to be replacing the spare tire retractor in the back of the vehicle because the one on here is broken and won't retract the tire up all the way. Alright, so I'm going to go after these rear shocks, take them off, and replace them with what's on the parts Trailblazer. I've got the truck jacked up. Jack stands on the frame rail. I've got my jack underneath my rear differential, and I can lower the differential and take the stress off of that shock, and should be decently easy to get this off. I'll go ahead and pull this 18mm bolt. There's a nut on the other side we'll have to get a wrench on and pull that out. This one here, you just remove the bolt. There's a nut on the other side, but it's welded to this. So I'll go ahead and zip these out. I think I've dropped the rear differential a little too far. I'm going to lift it up just a little bit. There we go. Alright, now we got to get this one out. Alright, that works pretty good. Alright, comparing the two, you can see with this, I can push down on that and compress it. No big deal. Better do it with this one. And since it's got that spring on there, I can't even compress it. That'll be a nicer shock absorber with that spring on it. This country road that we live on, it's got a lot of potholes. So hopefully that'll be a nice, smoother ride for us. Alright, so this truck has been making quite a bit of noise. Going down the road, there's a pretty significant rattle underneath the truck somewhere. Got a little rubber mallet. I'm going to start tapping on some stuff to see what it is that's making the rattling noise. I noticed that the heat shield for my muffler is loose. But that is not the sound we're hearing. It's coming from the sway bar. That is the rattle I'm hearing. And there's our culprit. A broken end link, completely separated from the sway bar. So the sway bar end link with the Bluetooth connectivity also explains why the truck has been handling poorly. I mean, look at that body roll. Alright, so we're going to zip off this nut. It's an 18mm. Whew, this puppy is on there. Alright, it's coming loose, but boy, is that puppy on there. That's the carnage. Alright, so let's put the new one on. Alright, so I just stuck the end link in to their spots. I've got the nuts here. I'm going to be putting just a little bit of blue thread locker on the threads. Alright, I'm not going to tighten that down all the way. I'll tighten it down whenever it's all back down on the ground and underweight, and then I'll tighten it down all the way. 18 millimeter, I'll zip this off. Woo! This puppy's hot, and it was smoking. It did not want to come off there. I look forward to taking this top bolt off now.
The lie detector test determined that was a lie.
Alright, so blunt force trauma didn't work, so now we're going to have to go after this with surgical precision. Well, surgical precision for the win. Frame took a little bit of a beating, but collateral damage to get this stupid thing out. Alright, some sandpaper, some Rust-Oleum. We'll get this thing looking really nice. Alright, little Daninator auto body. Paint and repair. Oh yeah, like it never even happened. Alright, I got the new end link in. I've got the nuts tightened down, just snug. I'm going to tighten everything down whenever it's all back down on the ground. I just got to put some grease in these fittings, and bada bing, we'll be done. So yeah, it was definitely time to replace these parts. Completely broken off. Boot was missing on this one. No grease, just a dry socket there, and some pretty old shocks. So sitting pretty with some new shocks and some brand new end links. Alright, next we're going to go after this spare tire retractor. The mechanism is rusted and broken or whatever, but it's not retracting the tire up all the way, as you can see. It's pretty loose, and I occasionally hear a thumping noise in the back of the truck whenever we go over bumps and stuff. So it's time to replace it. Alright, so I'm going after these really rusted bolts that hold this thing in. There's one here, and there was one right here that I already got out. Now, if I would have just started spinning these things off, you know, basically with just some blunt force trauma, I would have easily have broken these little clips that they bolt into. These are those little snap things that go over a hole in the metal, and it's threaded so you can put a bolt through it. And I snapped the clip on the parts Trailblazer when I was trying to remove this. So I ended up having to resort to a Sawzall to get that one off. So basically I just soaked the bolts in WD-40 pretty heavily, and I've got my breaker bar in my 15 millimeter socket, and what I'm doing is rocking the bolt back and forth like this. I feel it getting looser. So as I do that, then I'll work on loosening it a little bit more, just rocking it back and forth, and then loosen it just a little bit more, rock it back and forth. It's very tedious, but it's keeping these clips from snapping because everything's pretty rusted on here, as you can see. All right, I've got all three bolts out, finally. Thank goodness nothing broke. I think everything is pretty rusted on. All there is to it. Yay. Alright, the reason why I was beating on this with a hammer is we've got this little tab. There's a little slot in the frame that it was attached to. Got to get that tab into the hole first and then drive your bolt through, and that's how it attaches to the cross member. And then of course you've got just the two bolts here and here that attach to the frame that way. Other than the rust, it's not that hard to take off. Alright, this is what I mean about having to cut the frame out with the Sawzall, because the clip that the bolt bolts into snapped. Okay, when that snapped, all this bolt was doing was spinning with that case around it. So in order for me to get the bolt out, I just hacked this off of the parts Trailblazer. There's absolutely no need for it now. Between the bolt head and the frame, just cut the bolt out, and that's how I got it loose. I just took some time to clean the bolts. Now we're ready to install the tire retractor from the parts Trailblazer. Okay, I'm just finding that slot. Slide that in. Thread the bolts in just to hold the contraption in place. All right, this tube right here came out of this, so I'm just gonna try to shimmy it back in there. It's got a little groove that it sits in, that way the mechanism sits properly. Oil all these bolts so that they play nice. That's basically all there is to it, these 3 bolts. It's the rust that makes it incredibly difficult to replace. So we're about ready to put the tire back on. This is about as far as the old tire retractor would go, and so the spare tire would just kind of flop around like this. But thankfully, this one goes up all the way, and that is secure. Hallelujah. Glad to have that fixed. It's this little stuff like this that sometimes really bugs me, so I'm really glad to have this fixed. You know, I've got more important things probably on this car that are worthy of fixing, but I just couldn't stand to look at it. Really nice.